It's 2 p.m. and you are live on West Africa Democracy Radio broadcasting on 94.9 FM, and we are live online on WADR.org, on social media platforms, Facebook to be precise at WADR English Service, and on YouTube at WADR, and we're also live on our website at WADR.org. This is a special broadcast. Now, just so that you know, this weekend, November 17, 2024, over 7 million voters in Senegal will be heading to the polls to elect their representatives in what is seen to be a fierce contest. Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye said on September 12 that he cannot govern with an assembly dominated by the former ruling coalition, trusting that his Sunday's elections will offer him a comfortable majority to implement the promises made to the population. Well, welcome to this special debate on the parliamentary elections in Senegal. Just to remind you that this special broadcast is coming to you live on radio, on YouTube, and on Facebook and WADR English Service. You can be part of this broadcast by calling us live to air your thoughts and opinions on the program. I'm Abdullahi Hassan, and for the next 50 minutes, my guests will be deliberating the early legislative elections in Senegal. What future is there for parliamentary democracy in Senegal? That's the key question. What future is there for parliamentary democracy in Senegal? The 21-day campaign is unavoidably coming to an end, a campaign marked by violence and chaos. We will also discuss this on the program, but let me quickly bring on board our guest this afternoon in the studio. On my right-hand side is Ibrahima Sane, a former parliamentarian, a broadcaster, and of course an academician. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Ibrahima.
Good afternoon, Abdullahi. Sorry.
And good to have you on this special debate.
Thank you.
Now, on my left is Amadou Kamarage, a political analyst and a big friend of the house. Good to have you join us, Mr. Amadou.
Good morning, and nice to have you.
And how are you doing today?
I'm very fine.
Very well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this debate is live on our online platforms, and you can leave us your questions and opinions in the comments. We'll also be happy to read on air or have you express yourself via WhatsApp on +221 7818 45421. Again, +221 7818 45421. Well, it's about 4 minutes past the hour of 2 p.m. and it's only proper that we get the show started. And the most critical issue of late, which has dominated the discourse in Senegal, is regarding the political violence which is responsible for this. So, Mr. Ibrahim Hassani, as a former parliamentarian here in Senegal, I would like to open the show with you. And my first question will be, what do you think is or are the factors responsible for the violence we've seen in recent days?
Well, several factors really, but the main one is of course the fight for power. Hello to listeners first, and say I'm happy to be here and to be taking part in this debate. But it's fight for power, after all. What drives people to want to be an MP or want to be a president? Obviously, it's power, the capacity to decide and the capacity to take action. And secondly, it's suspicions also. I mean, elections in Africa don't always go the right way, the way they should go. So if people always suspect somebody's cheating or rigging the elections here and there, so they all fight. And then passion for politics. Passion for politics dominates and defines a lot of things in Africa.
Well, but today is the passion in politics about personal interest or collective interest?
Passion is collective as well as
personal.
So you can understand that people do fight in groups and sometimes fight it alone. And you can have a fight with just one person because you don't think like him or her. and that can create problems.
Well said. Amadou Kamaragi, you are a friend of the House, and we've had series of talks on electoral violence. And we can look back in Senegal's history, say in the last at least 4 years, until the elections in March. Till date, the regime is there to actually provide a concrete solution and even offer compensation to victims of electoral violence that occurred in the last 4 years. A number of people died, others sustained injuries. My worry would have been that by now, the population would have learned better that violence is not the way to go in elections, right? And so, what is Senegal yet to learn?
So it looks as if we didn't learn the lesson of the past, because if we see what happened today, the political landscape, it is regrettable, because we narrowly was back to the brink during the pre-electoral contact, where many people were also in prison. So I think Senegalese people and the political figures should learn from that. But unfortunately, we still seeing people enticing violence, and it is regrettable. So I think this question also is very debated among PASTEF party. Most of the militants today are claiming that these people who were victim of imprisoned or
rights abuses,
yes,
for instance,
should be compensated. And there are also other people who think that we shouldn't have a new parliamentary act, because it could really have impact, in the social living in Senegal. So it is a debate, and maybe we will see in the future, for the upcoming days, if PASTEF win, how they will handle with this question. But it's not a very easy question for them, because as you can see, PASTEF, it is a party, but what is behind the movement is very strong. And most of the time, most of the leaders, take a decision by taking into account the opinion and the opinion of the social network.
Social network.
Yeah.
That is the new trend. So opinions today are not formed really by having consultative meetings and discussions with statesmen or concerned citizens. It's more about what forms the opinion on social network. Do you agree with him, Mr. Ibrahim Sane?
Well, my view is we're living in a world where facts matter less and less, and feelings are taking over behind decisions and postures people adopt. And I think if you want to read the history of political life in African countries, I think if you take that into account, you'll see it. I mean, it could be you're from the same region. For instance, I was in 2017 an observer of the elections in Niger, and everyone told me in the area of Niamey, the late Ama Amadou, he died about 2 weeks ago, will win, although the ruling party was dominant in the area where he came from. So kinship may count, and feeling, you like someone or you don't like him. It's people, the level of culture, the cultural education here is such, it's not high enough for people to vote for policies. They trust you because they like you.
So it's more about politics.
Identity politics, not exactly identity politics. They might like you even if you don't belong to their group, kinship group. They might like you. I mean, Sonko is from the south of Casamance, of Senegal, but he's more liked outside Casamance than in Casamance. So, but they just like him because the way he presented things, the way he pulled out the departed regime and things like that. So, and it's just not in Senegal. can we say we're in a post-truth world today? I mean, the truth matters less and feelings dominate.
Well, talk about feelings. What can you say is remarkable about the 2024 parliamentary campaign that leads to the elections on Sunday? Because, I mean, Senegal has had a long, successful conduct of parliamentary elections. But what do you think is outstanding about this particular season?
I've been lucky to be an observer in a lot of elections in Africa. Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, Niger, Togo, and things like that. I was there because I was then a parliamentarian for the sub-regional organization called UMOA. So, and I've also been lucky to have been a journalist for quite a few years, even a lot of years, to be honest.
Okay.
And the discourse, I mean, the speech doesn't change much, really. I mean, you're trying to seduce. I'm not saying that policies don't count at all. It's not true. But it's interest for groups, interest for a region, and they will vote for you. Also, if they like you, or if you, so it's all a mixture of things in politics. So the speech today is not very different from past elections.
Okay, then. So what do you have in addition to what Ibrahima Sane said just before we beat away from violence?
So from violence, and also what he also said as regarded today, how people vote. Because in political science, we identify three kinds of voting. People vote because they like you, what we call effective vote. People vote because they don't like you, denial vote. People vote for programs, and today it is very scary to see people adhering to your project because they have read your program. Most of the Senegalese people today, don't read the program of the different parties. So I think it is something very important. So can you remind me the question?
Well, you already answered anyways. But what will and I think we had this pre-debate discussion just before we came on air. And one question I ask is, how close are we as a society, as a community, moving away from politics, policy politics to people politics? Because there were arguments just after the Senegalese election in March that the vote wasn't more about policies, it was more about the personality. Are we likely to see that happen come November 17?
So it won't be easy, because today, the first thing we should bear in mind is that the selection, who are selected in the different lists we have, do they have the capacity to play a key role in order to reform the country? So I don't think so. For example, if I take an example in my district at Kermassar, maybe I know some profile that who are in different lists, but I'm afraid of that these people have the capacity to play a key role in a parliament. Because most of the time, people enter in politics. It's what Nongo Sambasila, a brilliant political analyst, says. People will break into politics. They were not ready. They are just here because when the party was created, and they are with the leader, and when lists are created, nilly-willy, they will be inside. And today, I think what we should bear in mind is that people who have the capacity to anticipate, because there are different stakes, challenges, risk, and opportunities. For example, today, in many countries, we are talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and what are the different MPs today are preparing for a new act, because in many countries today, we can see emerging different kind of act in terms of AI. Today we have energy, we have oil, we are exploiting gas in the border between Senegal and Mauritania, even if we have a mining code. But what are the parliamentary What MPs, different MPs, or the would-be MPs are preparing. I myself, sincerely, I'm not expecting any kind of turnover or any kind of shift in this new parliamentary. I'm sorry,
Well,
but I'm expecting anything new, because it depends on the profile, and I think the profile really do not have the capacity in order to make things change.
well, talk about capacity, Mr. Ibrahim Sani. When you were elected parliamentarian, uh, let us go back memory lane at least to build a better understanding of why we're having this debate. How many parties were there at the time, or coalitions, if you can recall? Because today we have about 41, if I'm not mistaken.
But two dismissed.
Two dismissed. So, isn't this the reason for what he's saying, the gap in competency, perhaps, in the collection or caliber of people who will be representing millions of Senegalese in critical decision-making processes about legislations that will drastically change their lives, be it economically, politically, or socially?
Well, there are exactly 41 coalitions or parties running. And maybe we should widen a bit so we can understand. I'll start with when I was an MP. There were 12 people who had never, 12 MPs who had never gone to school.
12.
And they were MPs. Why were they elected? Because people liked them. Because they were in a party that voted them for this or that. They couldn't even read the laws, the drafts. So they would vote alongside the line the party asked to vote for. If you go to a country like Niger, they have a law saying that you cannot be an MP if you don't have your O levels. BFM, we called it in Senegal, BPC, I don't know whatever it is, in other countries. So they were making sure you can read at least the laws, the bills that are tabled. So do people in politics vote for policies, or they have to understand them first? Is it certain they understand them? I'm not so sure. That's the problem in Africa. If you go back to the birth, I would say, of parliaments, I would say probably was Britain in mid-13th century. Then we had the first English parliament. I think it was 1265, things like that. So that is 13th century. If you go back, it was essentially two parties, the Tories and the Whigs. But they were all haggling and fighting. You get out there, I want to be there. And it's still the same today. I want your seat. This is comfortable, that's where I want to be. You're the president? Okay. We don't have the same views in running the country, that's one thing. Secondly, I want to be president like you. I want to be the House leader, the speaker.
The majority leader.
Majority leader as well. This is what
chair
happens.
of a particular committee.
Yeah, and it's financially comfortable as well to be a president and majority leader. So there are several things in there. So let's not hide by being idealistic, thinking people are there for the interest of the people. We can discuss a lot about what the interest of
Okay, then. So we are beginning to receive some feedback online. First, there is we have two actually. The first is from Ambassador Connor Rufus. This is from on Facebook. He says, "Good afternoon, West Africa Democracy Radio. I am following you live from Painesville City, Liberia. Well done to the radio. Unfortunately, we are having a similar issue with our parliament in Monrovia because it's an impasse right now, which I think one of the reasons for that is the fact that the speaker called for an audit of the legislature in the last 6 years. And here in Senegal, we have Malik Sall. He also is saying thank you for the debate. We are not happy about the violence in this campaign. There should be a level playing ground whether you are a ruling party or from the opposition. Well, keep them coming, and our guests here, we keep talking about them. But Let me still stay with you, and then I will engage Amadou Kamara on that. What we saw, I think was it last year, there was a violence that surfaced from the start of the former political allies in the defunct Can We opposition coalition that almost controlled the old assembly. They were at war, and there were rumors or speculations that the former president Macky Sall manipulated the National Assembly to get to endorse some of his policies that were not really in favor of the country or the opposition. And the then opposition, now the ruling camp, PASTEF, they fought strongly against that. Now, are we likely to see a repeat of that scenario, or even worse, in the next legislature?
Can I say this, and I'm really categorical on this? It's very, very tough to rig elections, even in Africa today, because of the way they are organized. In Senegal, very early, you have journalists in polling stations who report immediately as soon as the results come out. What happened was President Macky Sall's camp didn't have the majority. So he discussed with allies and got some to come over to his camp. And that's what was called manipulation. Maybe yes, maybe no. I didn't see that as manipulation. I mean, he was maneuvering to get majority. And so he got 2 MPs to come over to him and have the majority. This is as simple as that. But believe me, I've been to a lot of countries and it's very difficult. You have observers, but it's all closed. I was in Togo. It was obviously the president's camp was going to win because of the system, the way the system is built. It's inbuilt. There are countries where you can lose your job as a civil servant if you're not for the president's camp. So there are a lot of factors that make people vote for the ruling camp. But once you get into the electoral stage, then it is difficult to rig or to cheat.
To cheat. Now, Amadou, what do you see that is likely to be the configuration of the new legislature? It is, like he said, it's very difficult to cheat, and for many, they would say it's right now a 50-50 chance. You never know who comes top. But do you foresee a new configuration between the ruling and opposition camp in the new legislature?
I don't think so. So I just have something to add. When he was developing about manipulation of the parliamentary group, I think in 2017, between 2017 and 2020, we occur to many anti-democratic things. For example, in Senegal, for a parliamentary group, to form a parliamentary group, it is required to have 10 MPs. And most of the time, what we saw is that 1 MP can dismiss and create...
Can just quit.
Yes. And most of the people were telling that it was, they were, I don't know how to say it, they were corrupt, they were bribed by Macky Sall. I don't know if it is true or not. But many of the members of the civil society and the opposition denounced that act because it weakened, the opposition. If they don't have a parliamentary group, they cannot have a time of speech. This is something that I would like to clarify. So as regard it today, I think PASTEF will win because the voting system, I think, is not good in Senegal. Because in Senegal, in the parliamentary and the local election, we have 1 round. You can't see someone having 30% and win the election.
Outright.
Yes, we don't have 2 rounds. For example, in France, if you go to the parliamentary election, if you do not have 51%, you cannot win the election. You go to the 2nd round. And here in Senegal, as regarded local and parliamentary election, someone cannot have the majority and win election. That's why today we are seeing what we call intercoalition, because people know that someone can win even if he doesn't have the majority. Other thing also I think which is very important, it's also how the representation of the MP in Senegal, because we have two lists, a national list and a departmental list. So I think it's nonsense. We need to have one list. MP should represent an area. So you can represent a department, or I don't know what we call here in Senegal arrondissement. Because having two lists, is very complicated. You are the MPs of Mbaké or of Pekin, and when it comes also to national acts also, you have to react.
True.
So I think we should have two kind of reform. The first one is the voting system. We organize election in 2 rounds. The second thing is the representation of the MPs, which will be a national list. As in France, you are a MP of a circumscription, but there are no MPs, national MPs or MPs of the department. I think it's nonsense.
Well,
is it a yes or no to what he has said?
Well, I don't quite agree with him. But
Okay.
I'll explain the history why we have two lists,
Exactly.
and maybe I hope he'll change his mind.
Yes.
and
Okay,
hopefully.
this is why we have the debate.
Exactly. Now, yes, he was right by saying that in the 12th legislature, some MPs was talked to come over and join the majority. He's actually right. I witnessed that. I was an MP at the time, so I was a witness to that. And that wasn't good. That wasn't nice. That was the thing to do. But that was the game, and they're played by. Secondly, the voting system in Senegal. First of all, it was just one list. You have to win a constituency. If you win your constituency, you're an MP. Then opposition said, but then you have the majority in all the constituencies. If we go by this system, there will be no MP for the opposition. If we go by this system, let's have some proportional representation in Parliament so we can have some MPs. So at the time, the ruling party said, okay, let's have it. We'll have on the local list, we will have 50% of MPs or 55% of MPs. No, at the time I thought it was 60. I won't swear for those figures, but that's like that. And 40% will come from the proportional list. So that's how Abdoulaye Wade's MPs got MPs. He got actually 18 MPs at the time, I think, and the ruling party got 80 something. If it wasn't that system, it wouldn't work. And yes, I agree with him that PASTEF will win these elections because of what he said. Let's have only local constituencies decide who is an MP. That system is called in Senegal Raw Gadu, winner takes all. I mean, you come first, you take it. You may have, he said 30%, 35%, you take all the MPs. If we do that, there won't be opposition MPs in Parliament. So the system was reformed to make sure there will be. What is a representative of the people? You get 35% and you take everything. What about the other 65%? They need to be represented. That explains the system of proportional representation. So I think it's very good I think it's a good system. He says there should be 2 rounds. No, maybe yes, maybe he's right on there, but we'll see how to work it out. And elections are very expensive to organize.
Exactly. So just briefly before we go on break, Mr. Ibrahim Sani, I'll still stay with you because what you're talking about today is what really exists or entails in Senegal, and he has said, and you agree with him partly, that there should be some form of reform or review of how this works. But then the desire of the ruling PASTEF is to have an absolute assembly. How dangerous is this to parliamentary democracy? Briefly before we go on break.
they will be mad not to have an absolute majority. I mean, this is what the game is about.
But how dangerous is this to parliamentary
Well,
democracy?
it won't be healthy, but then that's what the people want. This is democracy.
The people or the politicians?
If the people give them the majority, we'll have to agree that's what they want. Politicians always want to take over. They want the majority, and it's normal. They have to fight for, because if they don't have the majority, it'll be tough for them to rule the country. So, well, I wish they have, to be honest with you, I hope they have the majority, otherwise we'll have a hung parliament. I mean, no one being able to decide, the government not being able to govern. I don't think it's healthy for the country.
Well, we'll come back on this because we discussed this just before the program. We'll come back and talk more on that. So this is the live debate here on Senegal's parliamentary elections due to hold on November 17. With me in the studio, my guest, Mr. Ibrahim Sani. He is a former parliamentarian, a broadcaster, and an academia. On my left is Amadou Kamarage. He's a political analyst and a big friend of the house. Remember, you can join us to discuss or contribute if you want via our WhatsApp platform +221 7818 45421. Again, 7818 45421. We are live on Facebook at WADR English Service, of course, on YouTube, and you can also follow us live on YouTube. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
Campaigns are on for the parliamentary elections in Senegal. This November 17, millions of Senegalese will be choosing their local representatives in what will be a keen contest. Join us on West Africa Democracy Radio this Wednesday, 13th of November, for a debate on the future of parliamentary democracy in Senegal. Join political experts, civil society players, and other informed observers of parliamentary democracy in Senegal for the debate. Keep a date with us this Wednesday, 13th November 2024, starting 2 p.m. in English and 3 p.m. in French. This will be a cyber broadcast on 94.9 FM, WADR.org, and on our social media platforms, Facebook and YouTube channel. Be part of history and let your voice be heard. You can call us live or even send a WhatsApp message on 781-845-421. West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, your home for dialogue.
A political analyst, and just before the break we're talking about how dangerous it is to have an absolute majority in the parliament and how that threatens parliamentary democracy. But just so we received a message from one of our platforms, and it's from Clara Davenport. I hope I got that name right. And she says, "Hello, I am Clara, listening from Mali. I stumbled on your program and I think your guests have spoken well. I would like the former parliamentarian to clarify how the election will work." It's a question to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Clara, and thank you for your feedback. And there isn't really anything to clarify. I think the election will be won by the ruling party because of the system in Senegal. We call it Raw Gadu. It's a Wolof word saying winner takes all.
Winner takes all.
Yeah, that is at constituency level. Then there is a proportional list where the percentage you've collected from the constituencies is applied to the national list. If you get 30% of the Senegalese people voting for your candidates in all the constituencies, then you apply it to the national list, and you'll get a proportional number of MPs from the national list. This
Okay.
is the Senegalese electoral system.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Well, Amadou, let's talk about the dangers of having an absolute majority in the assembly. And according to what you said, there was never a time in Senegal's parliamentary history where the two camps, the opposition and majority, would work in an harmonious manner or way on legislative decisions. But are we likely to see that happen with the next legislature? I mean, because the reason we're having the discussion today is because President Bassirou Diomaye Faye could not work, according to him, because his party lacks a majority. So supposing he emerges tomorrow having the majority, do you see the opposition camp, wherever that will be in this case? Because BBY is almost split into two, because the former Prime Minister Amadou Ba has his own coalition. You have the PDS, too many, 41. We'll never know who the opposition will be today. But regardless, is there going to be a harmonious house working in the interest of the people?
Yes, I think in the story of Senegal, it's never happened having the opposition winning the majority, even if during the last legislation they were neck to neck. I think it was just 83 MP and 80 MPs. They were neck to neck. And Senegal always work on that. You know, the ruling party always had the majority, but it will depend on what they will do on that majority. Yes, democracy is the majority, and the respect of the minority, it is very important. But if you see in the story of Senegal, the most famous act that we have, you know, I don't want to be very unkind, but the most famous act we have is Ezan Act, Sadenjai Act, and also there was an act, terrorist act. But this kind of act were terrorized in order to eliminate or to fight some opponent. I'm sorry for that. Yes, and these are the most famous acts that we vote here in Senegal. For example, when we talk about act in France, everybody can remind El Khomri Act. It talks about working. Everybody will remind about the Retreat Act in France. There were very, very, very violent debate between Insoumise, Mélenchon, and other political figures. But this kind of act directly impacted to the society, you know, because most of the French people do not want their retirement age be lengthened. But here in Senegal, most of the act we vote, most of the time, it looks as if people do not see many impact on their life. So I think it is a high time that the new MPs, you know, have that on their mind, and to know that the act they will vote should have a very decisive impact on
the lives of
Senegalese
ordinary people.
society.
Very well. Mr. Ibrahim Hassan, let me turn to you now. Usually you will have parliamentarians, you know, be it at the lower chamber, the House of Representatives, or the upper chamber, the Senate, come together and put aside the difference or their differences when it's issue of national interest or national security. For instance, when there is a war on terrorism, or maybe a natural disaster where hundreds of people have been reportedly killed, thousands displaced, then you see them all come together to work in the interest of the people, and they call that emergency. But isn't the issue of unemployment an issue that Senegal faces today? Migration, environmental pollution from the extractive industry, talk about infrastructure, you know, enhancing or advancing the education sector. Are all these not critical issues that unite MPs? So do you think any one of these can tomorrow bring the new MPs together and work in the interest of the Senegalese society, and not think about who is the majority or who is opposition, or am I in support of what you're bringing or not, and just look at the people, the global good?
just a few seconds to say that I think it's healthy that government gets the majority in parliament. Otherwise, they cannot rule. I mean, where is the country? I mean, where do we go? I think it's healthy for that. Will they get it? I think yes. I won't swear for that because I don't know how many. I think the opposition may get the popular votes. I explained that. We had Hillary Clinton in 2016 having the majority votes, the popular votes, but still not being elected president. Yeah, so this I think may happen.
So Pastef?
Over Pastef. But Pastef will have the majority in parliament. This is what I believe. Because they will have collected more MPs from constituencies and fewer MPs and a few MPs on the proportional list representation. Okay. Now, in national interest, I sometimes smile a bit, sorry for that, when people talk about MPs going in there for national interest. There is a government who has views I don't share. Okay? I mean, I'm talking about from a voter standpoint. That you don't share the views of the government of the day. Why would you like them to stay on? You sometimes do what you can for them to fall. I mean, that happens in Britain. It happens, it has happened, I don't know how many times in Britain. It may happen in the US, I think it has happened. You try to get the government to fall. And because you don't believe these people will take the country where you want them to take, to be. Now, secondly, yes, there may be key elements, key situations. If the country is at war, maybe you will forget your quarrels, your differences, and say, this is a specific issue, let's unite as a country and face that issue. You may get that. Otherwise, forget it. MPs go to Parliament, first of all, to have a job. I mean, let's not forget that. It's a job you have, and it's rather well paid in these countries. And secondly, they represent more the parties that have gotten them to Parliament.
And not the people.
And not really the people that have voted for them. Of course, to stay on and get re-elected, you have to talk about the people who have elected you. You have to defend your constituency.
But in this case, it's not about the it's not about the people. It's more about the party's interest.
Here, people will vote for Pastef on party lines more, this is what I believe, than about issues. Some, quite a few, will probably vote for issues, but Pastef is a special case. I've never seen so passionate people supporting a party. I've seen it, I've been around for some time.
Is it about the ideology behind the party or the face of the party?
I think it was a speech, it was the narrative repeated on and on and on that have gotten people to just adhere to the party's speech, to the discourse they're hearing. And I think at constituency level, yes, they will have the vast majority on constituency. But what about the popular votes in general? I will remain to see.
Okay, Amadou, you spoke about it briefly at the beginning of this debate, but you heard what the former parliamentarian has said about Pastef. Which is it for you? Is it about the face of Pastef or the ideology, or is it both?
I don't get you.
Is it about the face of Pastef? In this case, allow me to mention Ousmane Sonko, the Senegalese Prime Minister who leads the party, or is it about the ideology that you think will give them the majority they want in this election?
So I think we want it or not, Ousmane Sonko is someone that one of the most influential political figure in Senegal, even if sometimes people disagree with him. So I think his personality also is taken into account, and also the fact that he fought against Macky Sall, which was not something obvious, because Macky Sall also is a very influential political leader. So I just would like to mention one thing, as regarded if the majority and the minority will work together.
Exactly.
So I think it won't be possible, because people act what we call in French réflexe pavlovien. Most of the time when there is a new bill raised by the majority, the minority will vote against. I will give just one example. For example, during 2022, Yahweh Askanwi, when they were going into campaign, they were raising the question of criminalize the LGBT Act. And the majority was against. They were telling that Senegal has already a bill for that. 2 years later, there is a MP from the majority. Her name is Amijay Nyibi, and she also raises that question about to criminalize the LBG Act. So you can understand, because when it's come to the majority, I will say no. When it is the opposition, I will say no. So I think Senegalese people and political figure mindset are not ready yet to work together.
But we're almost rounding up. Let me just turn to you, sir. At least he said somehow there is not, that readiness is not there yet, or maybe the willingness is not there on the part of the politicians to put the interests of Senegal first. But I want to simply mention, I think, 3 things that come straight to me, that maybe if you see a possibility of this unifying the assembly regardless, because for me that will advocate. So you have the issue of the oil and gas. Senegal is coming up strong very soon and will be mainstream in the oil and gas industry. And we've seen what has happened to many countries. Nigeria, for instance, every other day you have issues, court cases. It's either the government and the firms, or the people attacking the firms for negligence or environmental pollution. That's one, oil and gas. Security also should be a big priority for Senegal. We see what is happening around the Sahel, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and so it's either terrorism or, of course, the issues that threaten democracy. That's two. And we can also look at the issue of economy. Senegal is not struggling, but again, it's really fighting to stay afloat. Can these 3 factors or indices bring or reconcile the next legislature?
Yes and no at the same time. Security may, and I think can, put those people together. Senegal has been lucky enough to stay away from these terrorist incidents we read here and there and hear about here and now and then. Yes, if there is something threatening the country like terrorism, you may have people getting together. They will forget about their differences and maybe get together. Not very many issues will. How many MPs understand even the laws they're voting for? I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think there are many. I strived to read. Sometimes you're given. I got a law, a bill as thick as a book to be, and for the next day. I waged through. Of course, I didn't have time when I was an MP to read it. I didn't read all of it. So it's difficult because time is also
of the essence.
And I don't think many MPs do read. From my experience, not just in Senegal, but believe me, I know a few other parliaments. I haven't been there as a parliamentarian, but I've exchanged and I've been with MPs for 6 years and in the sub-region, and no. Yes, they can get together for very, very dangerous situations and situations for the country.
Otherwise, there's never getting together.
People will try to get the government out so that they can get in. It's like cricket, you know.
And most likely do the same thing that the government is being accused of.
And yeah, and obviously, the person who trained me in politics, I mean, if there is such a thing, told me, oh, it's a pity you with the majority because it's easy to be an opponent. Just come out and call out the people there. They're all thieves. They know nothing. They can't do anything. They're incompetent. You just keep shouting, and in the end, you get people to follow you. And you topple the government.
Okay, I now know how it works. I'm taking you from there. Well, this is just before we wrap up. There's a quick a message from Francois from Paris. He's listening online. He says that he's a Senegalese living there, and he wants the election to be peaceful. But he's asking you, sir, to recommend that should the opposition coalition win, what should they do?
If the opposition wins, they will say that PASTEF is now a minority in the country. They say, okay, the majority of March 2024 is gone because people have seen. You'll hear all that talk. People have seen that they're doing nothing. The opposition talks like that. They say, oh, you know nothing. You can't do anything. You're here for you're good for nothing. This is how all opposition, and I've heard it in Senegal. I've heard it even in Britain. Because I lived there for quite a few years. I spent 6 years in Britain, so I can tell you that I heard that, and you hear it in all over the countries that have a parliamentary system, and. PASTEF the president will be asked to resign because they'll say, okay, you don't have a legitimacy now in the country. People will tell him that. I don't think he will resign. I don't think it's fair to say that, but that's what will happen. But of course, it's not desirable for the country as a Senegalese citizen. I don't think it's desirable to have a government, a minority government, because they can't rule the country.
They can't rule the country.
And we may need to have other elections. It's already painful, these elections.
Exactly.
And having elections so soon is unthinkable.
And it will cost the state, actually.
It's very costly. And may cost lives as well. Just not money, but also lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, Amadou Kamarage, let me take this from you and of course from our listeners on radio and our viewers online. November 17 will go down as a historic date in Senegal's democratic journey or credentials, because that day will also decide the future of generations of Senegalese, right? And so what do you think at this point is crucial that both the politicians and electorate understand and bear in mind come November 17 and even beyond?
So I think people are still in the favor of the presidential election, because between the gap between the presidential election and the parliamentary election is too short, and people are still in disfavor, and people are expecting that thing can change. People voting for PASTEF think that are expecting that their life could change with Ousmane Sonko and Diomaye coming to power. But as regards the MP, what they should bear in mind is that once they are elected, they are no more MPs of PASTEF. They are the MPs of Senegal. And I think when we were talking about the separation of the power by Rousseau, I think this thing is badly explained by many experts. It is power which stops power. When power is abusing, there is another power that can stop it. It is what occurred in Senegal when Macky Sall decided and some MPs to postpone the election. The Supreme Court decided to organize fair and transparent elections. That's what we need, and that's what we are expecting from these new MPs.
Okay, Salut Jai in Dakar is saying hello WADR. Good work on the debate. Interesting conversation. Mr. Ibrahim Hassani, we have at least 3 minutes before we end this debate. Why I wanted to just have you say your last words, but I have one question for you, which is, do you think after November 17, Senegal as a country, we have a sort of reawakening that the voters will have the power to check the parliament and perhaps even ask for their recall should they fail to deliver on their mandate? Briefly.
I don't have that illusion, actually, because it is an illusion to think the voters will. No, voters move over from one camp to the other. We brag about the exemplarity of Senegalese democracy. In my mind, it's not quite an accomplished democracy yet, and we're learning the process. And you see politicians who are against these views, and move over to the other camp easily. It's indecent, but that's what they're doing right now in Senegal. So I don't think the voters will. Voters also will wait fallouts from the MP. So if you don't come, if you don't elect me MP, I don't have anything to give you. So poor countries have difficulties in establishing a proper democracy because of a number of things.
Okay then. So I'm looking at my time. So your last words as Senegal approaches November 17 for the parliamentary elections.
I hope government has the majority, and so that they can rule a peaceful country. This is my hope. I'm not saying I support government, but I'm speaking as a citizen.
Let's do this in split of 30 seconds each. I just received a question asking, do you see more women in the next parliament? Yes or no?
More women? No. I don't think so.
You, sir?
Yeah, there will be the same number of women as men because there is a law for that.
Very well.
On lists, you cannot establish it without parity.
The gender quota.
But the fact is that in most of the lists, people who are at the head are men.
Well, but there's a gender quota.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
there's no, absolutely 50-50.
So it works for everybody
The
at the end
law
of the
is
day.
50-50, but he is right.
Very well.
Those heading lists are men.
Thank you very much, all. Mr. Ibrahim Sani, a former parliamentarian, a broadcaster, and an academia. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, coming on live on radio, West Africa Democracy Radio, to discuss Senegal's parliamentary elections. And many thanks to you also, Amadou Kamara Gay, political analyst and a big friend of the house. Thank you all. And I hope for us to do this on the election day proper. Either you be here live or we talk on the radio. I am Abdullahi Hassan, and this will draw the curtains on the debate focused on Senegal's parliamentary election. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Christian Mukidi, Mustafa Sek, Maoji Juf for the technical support, and of course many thanks to Sani Mumuni Seibu, Moradet, and Christopher Aticho for their contributions. Do interact with us on our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. Do stay tuned for the French version of the debate with Sani Mumuni Seibu at 3 p.m. Good afternoon.